There obviously are many Maimori Hasidus on Shavuos. And Bechlal, Maimorim go in themes, which means to say, an idea that you have in one Maimor, you usually have in many Maimorim. For the reasons that I discussed with you recently. One of the ideas which is brought in many of the Maimorim of Shavuos is the fact that there's not a single word of the Aseres HaDibros which are original. Nothing in the Aseres HaDibros was a Chiddush. Nothing. Every one of the Aseres HaDibros we knew from before. First of all, more than half the Aseres HaDibros are Pasha the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nei Neach. That you're not allowed to worship idols, that you're not allowed to kill, that you're not allowed to steal, that you're not allowed to be immoral. These are in the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nei Neach. The remaining few, like Kibbud Avayim and Shabbos, Yidden got in Mora. It says in Chumash Rashi, in Pashas B'Shalach, Sham Som Lo Yecheku Mishpat V'Sham Nisahu, that when the Yidden were in Mora, remember Mora? Mora was the place with the bitter water, where they threw a stick into the water, it became sweet. And it says in the Pasuk, Sham Som Lo Yecheku Mishpat, that the Eibishter gave Yidden Yecheku Mishpat. Look in Rashi. Taught in Para Aduma of all things, Shabbos and Kibbud Avayim. So for the most part, maybe absolutely, there was no surprises in the Aseres HaDibros. So the question, of course, becomes, the Eibishter comes into this world once, never been here before, never coming again. Right? The famous word from the Rebbe Rashab, Mashiach is going to come, there will not be another Matan Torah. Mashiach is going to come, there's not going to be Matan Torah. Matan Torah given emo. Zoga Chiddush. The Eibishter makes an appearance in this earth. Shouldn't he say something new, something novel? And he says not only things we already know, but he says things that are very obvious, very simple, very plain, very ordinary, very einfach. And this idea, this question is raised in many Maimori Chasidus. And the answer the Chasidus gives is also very interesting. The Eibishter Dafke said simple things. Why? Why did the Eibishter Dafke say simple things? Because when the Eibishter gave the Torah, he didn't give it only for that generation. He gave it for all generations. If the Eibishter was giving the Torah to last one generation, he would have said very profound things. Because the Eibishter gave the Torah for many generations, the Torah was given to us, and we are over 3,326 years since that event. The Eibishter wants to send a message through the ages to us. The Eibishter wants to send a message through the ages to all people. And the message is a very simple one. Do not think that when the Eibishter came down on a mountain, he gave us mitzvahs. That's the answer to the question. Why are the Aseres HaDibros Dvorim Pshutim? Why are the Aseres HaDibros such simple things? Because the Eibishter is sending a message to us that says, in effect, don't think that the Aseres HaDibros are what's written on the page. Because what's written on the page is Pashut. In other words, Hashem says the kind of things that any person, anytime, anywhere is going to read them, is going to say, this is all God has to say? Hatish Kanayas, he has no Chiddush, he's something more novel? And the answer is going to be, read between the lines. The Eibishter said the simplest things in the Aseres HaDibros, that we should sit and have this conversation, in Hey Allah from Tafshin Ayin Dalet, and we should appreciate that the Aseres HaDibros were not about the Dibros. The Aseres HaDibros were not about the commandments. Aseres HaDibros were not about the words and the ideas of the Aseres HaDibros. The Aseres HaDibros grows in plain words was about a marriage between the Eibishter and Yidden. The Eibishter gave himself to us. Hashem says simple things, but in a very profound way. Hashem says simple things. What's important are not the words. What's important, what's behind those words. What's behind those words is the Eibishter, is the Ein Sof. That's Shavuos. In other words, what's the difference between a Chassid Shavuos and a Mesnagid Shavuos? A Mesnagid Shavuos is about Torah, and a Chassid Shavuos is about the Eibishter. When a Mesnagid celebrates Shavuos, he's celebrating the incredible Chochmah that the Eibishter gave him. When a Chassid celebrates Shavuos, he's not celebrating the Chochmah. And the Chochmah is great. Chochmah is incredible. There's no Chochmah like the Torah, and there's no Chachamim like Yidden. There's no doubt about that. But that's not Shavuos. Shavuos is not about the Chochmah of the Eibishter. Shavuos is about having the Eibishter himself. That's the point of Shavuos. So a misnagid stays up a whole night Shavuos and learns Torah and says Chidushei Torah. A chassid stays up a whole night Shavuos and he says words. Tikkun. And I know but nobody's asking me, but I'm offering my information anyway. I never heard of girls staying up the night of Shavuos, but if they're staying up the night of Shavuos, with all due respect, they should say Tikkun, not learn. That's what misnagdim do on Shavuos. They learn. So now I got you to stop because I mentioned misnagdim. To do it because we're Hasidim, we don't do. If you say misnagdim, maybe I'll get you to listen. The whole point of the night of Shavuos is Oisiyes HaTorah. You know why? Because it's boring. That's why. I have said Tikkun 40 times, close to 40 times. It's the most unexciting thing you'll ever do in your life. Because you're reading words. How do you read words? A few psukim, and you start getting interesting, boom, you jump to the end of the parsha. I don't know if you've ever bothered looking inside the Tikkun. I'll tell you what the Tikkun is. The Tikkun is every parsha in Chumash, every sefer in Tanakh, the first 3 psukim and the last 3 psukim. That's it. Then every Masechta Mishnayos, the first Mishnah and the last Mishnah. And when you finish doing the whole Chumash and the whole Tanakh and the whole Mishnah, you read a couple of pieces of Zayah and a couple of pieces of Sefer Yetzirah, beginning and the end, more or less. And then you read the Taryag Mitzvahs. The most interesting Part of Tikkun Shavuos Taryag Mitzvahs. 2 things. Number 1, by the time you get to Taryag Mitzvahs, your eyes are rolling in your head. And number 2, to read Taryag Mitzvahs is impossible at such a speed. You have to stop and think. 5 words per mitzvah. Imagine reading the whole Sefer HaMitzvahs LaRambam in a half an hour. Just it's so fast. It is the Sefer HaMitzvahs LaRambam. That's what it is. But it's very, very concise. Tikkun Shavuos is not enjoyable. Now, there are parts that we do read in total. For example, anything connected to Shavuos. You read both Aseret HaDibros completely. The story of Nasav and Ishma complete. That you can get into. You read the whole Sefer Rus. You read parts of Zeh that talk about Torah entirely, and Sfiras Eimebike entirely. In other words, there are parts of Tikkun which you could understand. The Haftarah of the first day Shavuos, which is in Yecheskel, and the Haftarah of the second day Shavuos, which is in Habakkuk, you read in entirety. But aside from that, you're reading words. Just enough words to start and to finish. Now the Rebbe spoke about this many times. And the Rebbe said the reason we do this is because we're emphasizing that Shavuos is not about learning. Shavuos is about God. And God is in the words. Not in the meaning of the words, in the words themselves. Just like all of us know about Simchas Torah, you've heard this many times. Simchas Torah, you don't celebrate the Torah by learning the Torah. Imagine going to a university where they're celebrating, they're giving some professor, a Lifetime Achievement Award for all the books that he's written, all the Chedushim that he's made, and they pick up his books and they dance with him. Everybody understands how ridiculous that is. If you have this fellow who's written, you make for Steinsaltz, a celebration. So he's going to make a speech. They're going to read from his books. They're going to sell his books. They talk about his books. We celebrate the Eibishter's Torah by closing it up, tying it up, and jumping up and down and dancing. How does that make sense? And the answer is, in plain words, because Steinsaltz, not the Eibishter. That's why. When a person writes a book, you celebrate his book by what's in the book. Chochmah. When you celebrate Simchas Torah, you're not celebrating the Chochmah, you're celebrating the Lakus, the Eibishter. And again, this is a basic difference in Misnagdim. Today the Misnagdim dance Simchas Torah. Amolok Zeiten, they in the Siddur HaGrad, there's Bechal no Hakafas. People don't know. The Vilna Gaon Siddur, there's no Hakafas. There's no Hakafas. It just says you dance with the Torah. The Nusach of 7 Hakafas doesn't say in Siddur HaGrad. You dance with the Torah. But when a person dances with the Torah, what are they dancing with? A non-chassid dances with the fact that this book makes him smart. So why waste my time dancing? I should become smarter. So you dance for 60 seconds, and then you open up a Gemara and you learn weiter. Chassidim dance with the Torah. Because we're not celebrating Chochmas V'Shal HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Eibishter is very smart. And the Eibishter gave us his wisdom, and the only problem is we're not smart enough to appreciate Chochmas V'Shal HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We do not dance with a Sefer Torah and Simchas Torah because it's the Eibishter's Chochmah. We dance with a Sefer Torah and Simchas Torah because in this Torah we have a connection to the Meibish Nalein. And the same is to Shavuos. I personally don't approve of girls staying up all night, but again, nobody's asked me my opinions. But if they're going to stay up, again, no one's asked me my opinion, I'm offering it, you should say Tikkun. Why? That's what Hasidim do. It's boring, go to sleep. The night before Shavuos, we say Oisiyes HaTorah, because we're not celebrating the knowledge. We have a whole year for the knowledge of the Torah. Matan Torah is the Eibush that came down on a mountain and married us. The Eibush came down on a mountain and gave us Himself. Himself. Getlichkeit, godliness. Now I'm going to tell you the same story I've told you so many times. Because I have no better story than this one, so you have to hear it again. Yeah. The story Pashat happened with me. And it had such an incredible impact on me. It really had an amazing impact on me. Now, I suspect that some of you are not going to appreciate at this point in your lives how serious this is. Not just how important it is, but how serious it is. But I think at a certain point in your life, you'll appreciate why this is so profound. I used to give a Tanya Shir in Flatbush. It went on me for 7 years, a very long time. During those 7 years, we learned through the entire Tanya cover to cover 3 times. It was lectures. And all kinds of interesting people came. As a fellow showed up at the shir, he came maybe for a year, almost every week. He must have been 55, 56 years old. And you didn't have to be a genius to realize that this person lives in Elam HaYetzirah. He's not exactly on this earth. He's an engineer, very smart guy. I tried to talk to him. The conversation lasted about 5 seconds, and I didn't know what he's talking about anymore. Brilliant. He's an engineer, very, very smart guy, but really a smart guy. His world is, numbers and measurements and materials. He works on bridges for the city of New York, you understand? And he came every week. Now, my Tanya classes were not for the uninitiated. They were not for Amaratzim. They were deep classes. I said what says in the Tanya, whether you liked it or not. Whether it was for Aleph, for Beis, or Gimel, I don't believe in entry-level classes. My classes were quite advanced, and he came every week. So, of course, I talked to him, Lizman, and I found out that this fellow had no intentions of going to a Seder on Pesach. A Seder on Pesach. So I said to myself, how frei must a Yid be not to have a Pesach Seder, right? What's the number one thing the Jew does? A bris. What's the number 2 thing the Jew does? Chanukah Licht. Number 3 is a Pesach Seder. No, okay, 4, I don't know, but the temple Pesach Licht. The temple, that's business. That's a different category. But a Yid does a bris, and if he's a little from, it's Chanukah Licht. If he's a little from, he can't get on matzah. He wasn't have a Seder. So whatever, I invited him to the Chabad house, and it dawned on me that this guy is really fine. He's a Brooklyn boy, goes full life in Brooklyn. He doesn't know anything. So I asked him, why are you coming to these classes? I mean, a lot of people came once and never showed up again. A lot. He came week after week. So he tells me, I'm looking for a relationship with God. It's really the second time in my life somebody told me something like this. I'm looking for a relationship with God. Ich will sein verbunden mit Nebishtim. Derech Agav, I had a former student who just recently corresponded with me about 10 years ago. Tell me, Rabbi, I became religious and I lost my relationship with God. I became frum, I lost my relationship. This is a tragic, you know what it is? It's a tragic lack of Hasidus. Now, if you girls who have been spending your entire life learning Hasidus don't have a relationship with God, it's a tragic lack of Hasidus. There's no other way to say it, because that's all Hasidus is about. They're Eibishter. And it was very upsetting when that girl said to me in front of 25 people, Rabbi, I became religious and I lost my relationship with God, and I had to defend religion. And you'll find that I've heard that from more than one person. And it's our fault, because the whole purpose of Hasidus is to bring the Eibishter back into Yiddishkeit. And if we're learning Hasidus and there's no Eibishter in it, then we're not learning Hasidus. We're niglifying it. We're missing something critical. So here's this man. He's not a yukel. He's not a batlin. He's very intelligent. He's a secular person. He's a scientist. And he wants a relationship with Eibishter. So I said to him right away, about any Lubavitcher would do, I said to him, you are a scientist. You're an intellectual. You're a smart person. If you want a relationship with God, that must mean that you've already resolved all of the conflicts between science and religion. You know, most people who are intelligent don't talk about the Eibishter because they have kashas. They have kashas of an Eibishter. They don't have terutzah, but they have kashas. And the Baruch Hashem for the kashas keep the Eibishter at bay. Secular people laugh at God. They don't explain why they don't believe. They just make fun of it. And Al Yevish Pnei Amaligim is a very difficult thing. When somebody laughs at you, you can't defend it because he's not even giving you the respect of humanity. Intellectuals who are scientists, for the most part, they mock and choizik of the Eibishter. Allah has come of Yiddishkeit. You don't even have a chance to have a conversation. So I said to him, you must have worked out all your conflicts between science and religion. He didn't come here to ask questions. He didn't ask me a single question on science and religion. He came here to learn about the Eibishter. So I said to him, you must have resolved all of your conflict with science and religion. And his answer was amazing. He said, I don't care. I want a relationship with God. I don't care. I want a relationship with God. Now girls, I want to be mishboinen. I want to study this idea. You are young. Believe me, you're young. You're young. And you're smart. You're intelligent. And many of you are quite knowledgeable. What you don't have is the experience of life. Years. You're not old. You're young. It's the only thing wrong with being young is you're not old. That's it. Otherwise, you're perfect. And it's pretty true, by the way. What is age going to give you? It's not going to make you smarter. It really won't. It'll make you. Your memory is going to fade, and your clarity is going to slow down. One day, someone will make fun of you, like you're making fun of your parents. Don't worry, it's going to happen. What you lack is wisdom. Wisdom means the connection between knowledge and life. That ideas and life have to connect. And it's very difficult to get wisdom young unless the Eibishter gives you a big neshama. Most people who are young don't have wisdom. And I'll tell you how that manifests. I was once your age. I remember being your age. I was a lot smarter then than I am now. I certainly thought so. Young people really believe that the most important thing is questions and answers. Young people really believe that intellect, seichel, is the greatest thing man has. And with reason you can accomplish anything. I mean, my kids ask me the same question I asked myself when I was a teenager. How come you can go to college campuses and have debates and prove to everybody that there's a God and you'll win the arguments and everybody will come from, end of story. The reason this is not so is not because we don't have answers. It's not because Yiddishkeit can't defend itself. But because ideas and knowledge have very, very, very little to do with life. People are not intellectuals. Only professors are. And unfortunately, you could be so smart and be a total idiot. If you allow seichel, ideas, right and wrong, answers and questions, debates, I'm smarter than you, ha ha ha, I slugged you up, to define yourself, you are intellectually rich and you are humanly dead, impoverished, sick, sad. The apikursische world, the secular world, has stolen from humanity its soul. If you're smart, everything has to make sense. Everything has to be proven. When a mother hugs a 2-year-old because they came in and scraped their knee, no intellectual can explain that. No scientist, no philosopher, no evolutionist can make justice out of that. That's a waste of time. It's a small person. It's not smart. The reality is the exact opposite. A brain is a tool. All the knowledge in the world, all the chokhmah in the world is a tool. Knowing things is not useful unless you know how to use them in your life. When you're 20, and I was once 20, you don't know that yet. You still think that having arguments, winning arguments, proving points, being able to show that your position is right, matters. You know, everybody know the story with Alter Rebbe? Some interrogator asked him a question. How did he answer? He laughed. He laughed. Why? Not because it wasn't a good question, not because he didn't have an answer, but because it's irrelevant. Does it really matter? I mean, girls have been asking me all the years, and I do it religiously. How do you resolve the conflict between free will and hashgacha pratis? You know what my answer is? Who cares? Who cares? It's an irrelevant philosophical exercise. It makes no... I need to know. Why do you need to know? When you went to the store and you chose orange over cherry soda, Did you ask yourself, am I really choosing this or is it hashgacha pratis? It feels like a choice, sounds like a choice, it's a choice, that's it. You can take nevach, a piece of chocolate which is chalav vacuum, that tastes better and cheaper, or a piece of chocolate which is a little bit more bitter than chalav yisrael, and you chose chalav yisrael over chalav vacuum. Does it really make a difference if it's hashgacha pratis or b'chira chavshis? It feels like choice, it sounds like choice, it's choice, that's it. All the philosophy, I'm sorry to tell it to you, it's babamaisis. It's overblown. It's true, it has a place. Learning and knowledge has a place, but learning and knowledge is not a person. Learning and knowledge is a machine, is a computer. A human being is his neshama. And a neshama is such terribly unimportant things as humility, bittul, want to be normal, be humble, humility. It's part of being a human being, humility. And faith. Not being afraid to believe in the Eibishter. Not being afraid to believe in Torah. That's a human being. A human being is much, much, much bigger than Einstein, than the biggest geniuses. But the bigness of humanity is not cool, you understand? The bigness of humanity is not what they teach in college. The bigness of humanity is what you learn about in Hasidus, day in, day out. And I'll say it to you again. If you have learned Hasidus and you didn't get this message, you have never in your life learned Hasidus. Hasidus is about Neshama, and Hasidus is about the Eibishter. What does the Neshama and the Eibishter have in common? They have nothing to do with reason. They have nothing to do with intellect. This is what happened at Matan Torah. This is what happened when the Eibishter came down on a mountain and spoke to the Jewish people. Getlichkeit met Getlichkeit. The greatest chokhmah in the world, the greatest chachomim in the world, is Yidden and Torah. There's no doubt about it. But it pales in comparison. It's so much less important than Matan Torah. Hashem came down on a mountain and said things that children already knew. Don't steal, don't kill. That's what you came to tell me? I shouldn't steal, I didn't know before. No, I didn't come to tell you anything. I came to meet you face to face. And I came for you to meet me face to face. Or in the Lashon of the Moreh Chazal, this is our marriage. This has nothing to do with intellect. And I want to tell you the reason this is the topic that I chose for today. This is why I'm talking about this today. Because unfortunately, the world in which we live, the Goyish world in which we live, which has invaded our space considerably, disagrees with everything I just said absolutely and categorically. The idea that the most important thing is I'm smart, and I read books, and I know stuff, and I understand questions, has become too important. And it's Mailim Umastir on the emes of Hasidus. It covers over the emes of Hasidus. The emes of Hasidus is the emes of Yiddishkeit, it's the emes of Torah, it's the emes of Eibishter, and the emes of the Jewish people. And I'll explain to you very plainly. Let's say you're very, very bright, and you're a little bit of a geek, a little bit of a weirdo, yeah? And you read stuff, you go online, you read books, and you know about all these so-called smart people who criticize the Bible and criticize the Tanakh. I mean, the disrespect that the secular world has for our religion, for Yiddishkeit, is unbelievable. What they never ever tell you is that they started off with an assumption that it's a Baba Mice. They didn't start off with an assumption, we don't know if it's true or false. They don't even give it the benefit of the doubt. The way secular people look at our religion discredits them. They have no right to have an opinion about it. They don't even treat it like they would treat Homer or the other ancient. They read books from people who lived 2,500 years ago. It's like reading the Sefer Torah. But the Chumash, a joke. The Mishnah, the Gemara, Baba Mises. It's so academically inaccurate. It's so biased. It's unbelievable. But you're a young girl from Beis Rivka who read a book, and you're so excited. Oh, I read this book, and they have proof for this and proof. Baba Mises, I'll go by Baba Mises, I'll go by Baba Mises. But unfortunately, people read books, and they know stuff that they shouldn't be reading. They think they're so smart, doesn't make a difference. Let's say somebody comes to school with all kinds of questions, because they read all kinds of stuff online or in books. And let's say he bumps into the perfect teacher. And the teacher answers every single one of his questions. I'm asking you, answering those questions does what to one's emunah? It strengthens it? It weakens it? Or it makes no difference? At the very least, it makes no difference. At the very most, it will make... It's just the way people are designed. The seichel is mailam u'master on the neshama. Answering questions has nothing, never has, doesn't, and never will have anything to do with the emunah. Because they're coming from different places. The brain is called koyres hanefesh, and emunah is the neshama itself. Now we have neshamas. Just like the people on Mitzrayim have neshamas, when you're going to be a mother of little kids, they have neshamas. We have neshamas. And it's the most precious thing we have. Are we going to gamble with our neshama because we want to be sophisticated? We wouldn't do it with our children's neshamas. Are we going to be smart and enlightened? Here's a man whose entire life is Chochmas Chitzonius. I'm telling you, from that story came the whole JLI course that I wrote. I mean, it inspired me so unbelievably. Because what did this man tell me? I don't care, I want a relationship with God. What was he saying in those 6 or 7 words? He was saying, do you think the questions are important? Do you think the answers are making a difference? It makes a difference to me. I want to live with Eibishter. They're two different things. If I have questions and they don't have answers, I can't believe in Eibishter. Only when you're 20, not when you're 50. Because eventually you realize, and one drop of emunah is so much stronger than all this chokhmah. It's so irrelevant. You have questions, you don't have answers, so the answers exist. You're not the first one to think of these questions. Don't you realize these questions have been asked for 1,000 years? Don't you realize every single question has an answer? It's already written in some book, in all likelihood by a Gadol B'Yisrael. Yeah, but the scientist says Faket. Oh, the scientist says Azai. Rambam says Azai. You know what it comes down to? What you choose to accept. The question is a question, and the answer is an answer, and the answer is a good answer. But they hope you don't know that the answers exist in books. You think when people ask you questions about the Bible, those questions have never been asked before. You think you're uncovering episodes like this, a chiddush. Every question has already been asked, and every question has already been answered. It exists in books. It's a question of what you hear and what you're interested in. And I want you to understand something. And let me shift gears for a moment or two. Shavuos happens to be the yard set of the Baal Shem Tov. So let's talk about the Baal Shem Tov. Once upon a time, there was a science, which today is not considered a science at all. And by the way, once in a time, people are going to say the same thing about the sciences of today. There used to be a science. We don't consider it a science anymore. You don't understand that. Of course you don't understand it, because everything we do today is called empirical. But there's nothing empirical about empirical except our ability to measure things. Tomorrow we could measure things better. Today's measurements become a lie. But right now it's fact, it's empirical, yeah? Once upon a time there was a science that every scientist in the world laughs at. It was called philosophy. Philosophy today is not taken seriously. Nobody considers philosophy science. If philosophy proves something, it means nothing. Why? You didn't measure it using a telescope and a microscope and physical evidence and so on. Nobody takes philosophy seriously. Nobody does. Nobody does. There is a theory in science that's called string theory. I don't know if you guys are familiar with string theory. You've heard about it, I'm sure. String theory is supposed to be the theory of unification. It's supposed to explain all of physics in one principle. And string theory works. It explains everything mathematically. But the idea is that string theory has been machadish. They will never ever be able to prove scientifically. Impossible. It's too small. In other words, string theorists have used mathematics to create 11 dimensions, and some of them have created parallel universes, and as they say in the real world, blah, 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 and blah means boring. So many times blah means very boring, to explain everything. But they will never ever be able to prove it. There are many scientists who say string theory is a philosophy. It's bubba-mises, it's a waste of time. Because if you can't prove something physically and directly, it's nonsense. That's where the world is right now. if something in today's world, philosophy is not taken seriously. 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, it was the science of the time. It was the chokhmah of fact and truth. And in 1,000 years from today, they're going to look at the sciences of today just like we look at the philosophies of old. Hard for you to believe, and guess what? We'll still be reading the same Sefer Torah. That's never going to change. Philosophy came along and started asking questions. Where did the world come from? Where is the world going to? Who made it? What kind of personality does he have? Right? All kinds of questions. The Jewish people had no answers. Yiddishkeit had no answers to any of these questions. Why? I mean, why? When you live in a world where everybody worships stones and rocks and dust, you don't have to have answers. You're serving Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, Beirei Shamayim V'Aretz. The Jewish people were worshipping one God. The pagans were shechting their own children as karbonas to these imaginary many gods. The Jewish people had anything to defend. Oh, the Goyim got smart, they became hypocrites. The Yevonim gave us chokhmah, it's called philosophy. The Jews had no answers. We had no answers. We had no answers because we never asked the questions. We never asked the questions because they were irrelevant. We believed in God. And it became a scramble. What do you do? Oh no! Abish is about to die. Har Sinai is about to be retroactively negated. It never happened. In general, the Jewish world became split into two, which is essentially Europe, Ashkenaz, and Sfad, Spain, and other parts of the world. In Europe, the Goyim were still primitive. The Goyim were still living like they lived in the pagan times. So the Yidden had the Emunah Tahira, the same Emunah they had until now. But in Sfad and in Egypt, where the Rambam lived and where the Rasag lived, where the Goyim were modern, and modern meant philosophy, and philosophy meant asking such questions and no answers, the Gedolei Yisrael had no choice. They wrote Jewish philosophy. Jewish philosophy is not Torah. Jewish philosophy is taking the principles of philosophy and using them to argue Torah. Jewish philosophy is no different than someone coming along today and using science to prove that the world is 5,000 years old, to prove that Har Sinai happened, to prove that Avraham Avinu was a historic figure, not a creation of some writer's imagination. And Jews started studying philosophy. It answered their questions. Did it restore their faith? I say not so well. Because answering questions does not have anything to do with emunah. The questions to the answers touch the brain. Emunah is the neshama. They're very different. But they had no choice. They had no choice. If Yidden are going to be saved, if Yiddishkeit is going to be continued, and the Jewish people have to believe it's true, they had no choice but to use the science of the time to answer those questions. And for many years, philosophy was the answer. Jewish philosophy was the answer to all the supper courses. And then years later, a little book was found in the ground. It's called the Zohar. Kabbalah came on the scene, and the Jewish world blew up. People ran around screaming, take every book of philosophy ever written and burn it. It was all a mistake. The Rambam, bad man. The Sag, worse man. Why? Because they dealt with the issue with the tools they had. They didn't have any other tools. The best tools the Yidden had until the Kabbalah came back on the scene was to answer philosophy with philosophy. And I say it again, which is not different than somebody coming along today and answering science, making Torah emes al pi science, which is pretty pathetic if you think about it. And you know what? I don't want to say that it was pathetic then, but it was pretty limited. Fast forward. Once upon a time there was an enlightenment. Right? How far back does the Enlightenment go? Depends where you're from. Italy, Austria, France, Germany, Russia, Poland. Goyim got smart. Basically, Goyim got smart means they rebelled against the church. And by the way, rebelling against the church has nothing to do with our Torah and our mitzvahs. The church is Christian. Christianity has zero in common with anything Jewish people have and know and believe. Nothing. Zero. Absolutely nothing. And this revolution created apocoursis, a whole new age of apocoursis. Kaltkeit. I've told this to you many times. The biggest problem with the modern Goy is not that he doesn't believe there's a God. He won't even think about it seriously. God? It's a joke. What means a joke? It's a serious question. This world came by itself, or somebody made it. There's no evidence. What kind of answer is that? There's no evidence. But here's what you have to get, and this is the bottom line. The Eibishter, who created this enlightenment, the Eibishter, who created the beginnings of the modern world in which we live, where the smarter you are, the colder and the less you believe, and the less humanity you have, created a different response. It's called Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov is the Eibishter's answer to the Enlightenment. But the Baal Shem Tov is very, very different than what happened 1,000 years ago. 1,000 years ago, when philosophy came in the world, the only answer the Jewish people had was Jewish philosophy, which was like saying the way to answer the questions the scientists have on Torah is with science. The Heilige Baal Shem Tov came along at a time when nobody understood why we needed him. When the Baal Shem Tov lived where he lived, there was no need for Chassidus. The Jewish people were all very simple, very sincere, very tmimistic. The Baal Shem Tov's importance is understood today much, much better than it was understood then. Baal Shem Tov's importance was understood 100 years after he lived, much, much better than during his physical lifetime. Who needs a Baal Shem Tov? Why do people have to eat kishke with their fingers and dance? What does that have to do with intelligent people? And the answer in a word, girls, is that Baal Shem Tov came along to tell us one word, one simple thing. The most precious thing we possess is not our mind. It's our soul. And when you look at a person, not from the perspective of his mind, but from the perspective of his soul, the Poshet Balagola may be closer to God than the big Rosh Yeshiva. Now this makes the Misnagid crazy, but I don't know how to tell this to you. It's true. It's not propaganda. It's not trying to make the underprivileged person feel good. It's emes. Where is the Eibishter? Not in our brain, in our neshama. If you want to know what Hasidus is, I have a nephew of mine who traveled someplace, not important where, and he bumped into a Lubavitcher who's pretty much an Apokadis. He's still a Lubavitcher, but doesn't believe in anything. So he tells my nephew that it gets him very, very angry every time they say Chabad philosophy. Chabad is not a philosophy. And you know what? He's right, it isn't. We call it philosophy because it has a logical system. Chabad is not a philosophy. You will never, ever find in a maimer philosophical questions. No maimer will tell you, how do we know there's a God? No maimer ever will tell you, how do we know Har Sinai happened? No maimer will ever tell you, how do we know Teda Rebbe happened? Maimorim will simply say, of course the Eibishter is emes, of course the Teda is emes. Let me explain to you the neshama of it. Chassidus is not a philosophy. Chassidus doesn't answer questions. Chassidus doesn't prove anything. Chassidus accepts. Maisha emes v'teirasa emes. This is where Chassidus comes from. The Baal Shem Tov came along and he said, the answer to the kaltkite of the world is not chokhmah, but emunah. It's not seichel, but fire. It's not Torah, but pnimius ha-Torah. Girls, pnimius ha-Torah is not a deeper seichel. Pnimius ha-Torah is the Eibishter. Pnimius ha-Torah is Oyer Elokii, the divine light which is behind the Torah. This is what we received at Har Sinai. That's what the Eibishter came down on the mountain and gave us. And this is what we possess. And this is why you go on Mivtzayim, and this is why you go on Shlichus, and this is what needs to be preserved above all else. What is a chassid? A chassid is a believer, without doubts. Not with answers, with no questions. That's a chassid. And if you don't understand this, you're very, very far away from Chassidus. And if you don't understand this, you've got two responses. If I'm telling you something radical, something you've never heard, but you've heard it from me many times, you have two responses. Your first response is, oh, that's what Chassidus is. I want to be a chassid. I want to be a chassid. How do I become a chassid? Or your second response is, oh, I thought Chachma Bina Das was this big intellectual system. I mean, Chassidus Chabad is really also very foolish. Why did I get involved in such a stupid business? Those are your choices. And I hope you choose the former, not the latter. Because it's a pretty much a waste of a life to choose the other. Lubavitch and Chassidus is not intellectual. It's all about emunah. It's all about fire. It's all about the Eibishter, not about Chochmas HaTeira, the Elokus which is behind it. Misnagdim complain that in Chassidim don't learn. First of all, that's not true. Some of the greatest Lamdim in the last 300 years have been Chassidim. The greatest Go'inim have not been Misnagdim at Chassidim. But why do they say it? Because unfortunately many of us don't respect Torah enough. It's true. It certainly doesn't look like we appreciate Torah. Why? Why? Because we're busy with something far, far more important, which is the Yiddish and the Neshama. Yidden survived not because they studied Torah, because they had emunah in Torah and the Eibishter. That's what the Baal Shem Tov is. If you want to understand what Shavuos is, according to Chassidus, Shavuos is not Chochmah, it's not ideas, it's not philosophy, it's not questions, it's not answers. Shavuos is the Eibishter. And there's only one way to get to him. The only way to get to the Eibishter is stop asking questions. Look for your neshama. But that's mean. That's brainwashing. That's provocative. And true. That's all. You're going to be a mother one day, yeah? You already know how you're going to raise your kids. Start raising yourself like that. Don't just say klug. I promise you, every question you could ever think of, you didn't invent it. And 100 years ago, or 200 years ago, or 500 years ago, 1,000, the answer exists in a book. And as they say, may it rest in peace. Leave it alone. You have a life to live. You are learning in Lubavitch. You have the schus to be close to the Moira God of the Chassidus. What is it? Chassidus is one drop of Amunah is worth more than 1,000 pounds of Chochmah. I know that doesn't sound cool. I know that doesn't sound modern. But it's true. It's true. Because life is not ideas. Life is faith. Life is humility. Life is faith. Life is simple. Every human being is born with that simple. And then they go to college and they steal it from them. And they do it generation after generation after generation, and they get away with it. Why? The smartest people in the world. They are the smartest people in the world. But so many of them are so sad. The Baal Shem Tov's whole metzius is to fight against that. A Lubavitcher Chassid's whole metzius is to fight against that. Going on Shlichus is the whole metzius is to fight against it. To put higher than all of those things, not answers to questions. No questions. Emunah in the Meibishter. That's Shavuos. That's why the Eivish came down on a mountain and he told us a bunch of things we already knew. He wanted to make it clear, 3,326 years on, I didn't come down on the mountain to tell you rules. I could have sent Moshe Rabbeinu. I came down on a mountain so you should meet me and I should meet you, and we should never forget the meeting. Never forget the meeting. If you have questions, you can ask. The Chiddush of Chabad Hasidus is that the Emunah needs strengthening. The Emunah needs strengthening. And the strengthening of the Emunah is Seichel. But never, never that the Seichel